Hi, submarine friends. I'm in the submarine again, and I'm just tidying up the very last three teeny projects. One is this heat tape on this, I can't see it, on this exhaust right here. There's a little bit of that insulation material exposed. I want to cover that up with that tape. The other is I want to install my strainer, and the other was putting the coupler in on my emergency breathing apparatus. Oh, come on. So putting strainer in is, oops. Any water that leaks, I like to put it into the very back section because I have a rag there that just soaks it up. Okay. So what I started talking about in a previous video was about the pressure test, the unmanned pressure test that I have to do. So in preparation for that, I've removed the vent valves. I know I talked about putting covers over the the connection point that just has hose clamps. And then I thought, well, what I should be doing right now is preparing it for that pressure test, because that has to be done before I dive it. And this may just very well stay at the lake, so I don't want to have to, bring it home just to deal with that. So, I'm lucky I got the right size parts. Sometimes I screw that up. So anyways, let me just check here. That's directional, so let's go that way. So what I did is I just took the pipes off that carry the air to the valves that are up here, and I just put plugs in, and then I'm going to run to the hardware store and just, unless I have some here, and pick up some valves. So what I have to do is I install the valves. In. So I just have a fitting that goes into the rubber hose, and I clamp these valves in. So then, to deep test the submarine, all I do is I fill the variable ballast tank inside here, and then I go outside, close the hatch, pull a vacuum on the submarine. So I'll just bring a vacuum out there with me. My little electric vacuum pump that I got to do that is not cutting the mustard. So if I have to, I'll just bring out actually the shop vac works really good. So I'll open this valve right here, which lets fresh air into the submarine. And then I'll go outside, or depending what I've got for fittings here, I can also do the same with the discharge port. That might be easier. Yeah, that'll be easier because there's nothing outside. So I'll just thread a nipple into the discharge for the forward bilge pump, put a valve on it, and then I can pull a vacuum. And I want to pull a vacuum because I want to ensure that the hatch is closed, sealed, and won't leak any water. You see, when I'm inside the submarine, I can pull a vacuum in here just using the onboard compressor. So I just send air to the ballast tanks before I dive, and that draws the air out of the submarine, locking the hatch. I like to do that because then I know everything is good. Just have to pull a tiny vacuum, just the tiniest little vacuum. The amount of vacuum of climbing a mountain pass, the air pressure change climbing a mountain pass. So I lost my train of thought there for a second. So I put a fitting in there to pull a vacuum, and then when I want to do the test, like I said, I fill the variable ballast tank. Then I go outside, pull the vacuum with the hatch closed. Now the submarine is all safe to dive. Close the valve on the vacuum, where I pulled the vacuum. And then I open the vent valves, so I'll be in my inflatable boat, and I just open the vent valves. Now those valves will have a hose, so I missed that part. So I put a hose so the valve reaches the surface, because those vent connections are 2 feet underwater. So the valve comes up to the surface, both ends, and I just open the valve and let all the air out. Now the submarine will not submerge yet. So then I take weights, because see, I'm not in the submarine. So the submarine needs my 200 pounds to submerge. So then I put weights on the deck and on the back of the submarine, making it nice and level. And one of those weights, or a couple of those weights, will have ropes tied to them. So normally what I would do is I would rig up a kind of a complicated system of air lines and a pressure tank, and then I have a valve and I pull on a rope, opens the valve, puts air in the ballast tanks, and then it comes to the surface. But because this is a pretty shallow test, I will just put ropes on a couple of weights and let the submarine submerge, because I'll keep adding weights until it actually sinks. And so then it'll just slowly sink to the bottom of the lake. There may be a tiny bit of residual air in the forward and aft ballast tanks, just because. And so that air will compress, and as it compresses, the submarine will descend faster and faster, but still very slowly. And so I let it sit on the bottom I'll probably just do a 10-minute test, and then I will pull on the rope, hoist the weight to the surface, and the submarine will come up. As long as it didn't take on any water, it'll just come right up to the surface, because it's no longer heavy enough to stay down there. Then I will remove the weights, and I can blow air into the ballast tanks through those valves that have let the air out. I'll just carry one of these Scott pack tanks. I have like 13 or 14 or whatever of those, all full of air. So then that's what I'll use to bring it fully to the surface again. Then I'll hop inside the submarine, and I'll make sure that everything is okay. So the first test is just looking for leaks. And then I'm very confident there will be no leaks, but these are the steps you have to take. And then I will repeat the process, and I'll send it to the bottom, and I'll let it sit there for 1 hour. That's the rule for testing. You submerge it 1.5 times the depth you're going to operate it for, or you're going to operate it to. You do it for 1 hour. So it sits on the bottom for 1 hour, and then you bring it back to the surface, and you are officially allowed to dive your submarine to whatever the depth is in relation to the pressure test. So if you sent it down 1,000 feet, you could dive it to, 750 feet? And that's how simple it is. Now, when I tested my deep diver submarine, which was rated for 3,000 feet, the deepest lake we have here is 1,000 feet. So I sank it 1,000 feet, but I used air. And I just had a little 1/4 inch yellow rope going down to this thing. Boy, talk about faith, eh? So I just let it submerge, and I had a spool of rope on the surface with 2 floats, so that spool just turned floating in the water, and it just coiled out that whole 1,000 foot roll of rope. And then I waited 1 hour, because I didn't do 2 tests, I just did 1. And I pulled on the line, and up she came. Everything was fine. So the interesting thing about these pressure tests is when you go really deep, like 1,000 feet, I only did that once. So a normal pressure test for me is around 400 feet is what I tested all the other subs to. So they don't come straight up, because you put air in that ballast tank, and you put a lot of air in to break it off the bottom, because they'll stick to the bottom from just sitting in the mud. And so you give it a good shot of air. And the other thing is, I usually weigh them down. I add enough weight so I don't have to sit there all day waiting for it to sink to the bottom of the lake, especially 1,000 feet. So, it might be 100 pounds positive. so it'll go down faster. So what happens is the air is expanding coming up, and so it really picks up speed on the way up. And so they don't come straight up. They'll, I've had them come up hundreds of feet away from the boat. So when I do this test, I have to start the motor in the boat and get the hell out of Dodge, because I don't know where it's coming up. But when it's 1,000 feet deep, you got a lot of time, because it's still got to come up 1,000 feet, which is quite a ways. So I am just going to get this stuff installed, and then I'm going to do some touch-up painting. I still have to paint my hatch inside and outside, so I'm going to do that today. Today's the last sunny day for a while, so I need to do that now while it's sunny. And I need to touch up the hull as well. I'm still not going to paint it. I'm being stubborn. I'm not going to paint this thing nicely until it's been in the water, 100% working good, and then I'll commit to a nice paint job on her. But I'm just going to touch up all the rusty spots and whatnot. And then I just have to clean up my inflatable boat, which I'll be towing around with me, because when I first get to the lake, the first couple of days, I'm just going to run the bag off this thing. I'm just going to go up and down the lake. It's about, I don't know how long that lake is. It's several miles anyways. But I'm going to cruise the daylights out of this thing and make sure that the mechanical system for propulsion is all really good. And then I'm going to do the pressure test, 2 pressure tests. Well, one's a leak test and then the other one is a pressure test, but they're both under pressure. And then I will get my diver buddy out, and we'll start diving this thing. I'll just start shallow, get used to it, get a feel for it, but I get pretty impatient. When I know that it's been pressure tested, I get impatient, and then I'll probably just head right to the bottom. So that's the plan. So bear with me, we're getting there, it's almost there, and I'll be diving. Ciao.